The apartment smelled faintly of rain coming in through the cracked bathroom window and the leftover curry we'd eaten 3 nights ago. I was standing at the stove at 4:17 a.m., reheating nothing, just moving a wooden spoon through cold lentils because motion felt better than stillness. 41 looked a lot like 31 when nobody was around to see the difference. The insomnia had followed me across 3 cities and 2 careers. It knew my address better than most people did. Soft footsteps on the hallway runner. I didn't turn right away. I knew the rhythm. "Hey, Eli." Noah's voice was low, scraped raw from sleep he hadn't managed to keep. My little sister, 29 now, though the title still fit her, the way an old coat does, stood in the doorway wearing one of my faded Columbia Law t-shirts and a pair of my boxers, because all her laundry was still in the dryer downstairs. Her curls were flattened on one side, exploding on the other. She looked exactly like the kid who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, except thunderstorms were different now. Couldn't sleep? I asked, pointless question. She shook her head, patted across the tile, and leaned her hip against the counter beside me. For a minute, we just listened to the tick of the wall clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the river was a black ribbon catching the first sickly yellow of streetlights. Noah stole the spoon from my hand, tasted the lentils, grimaced. "These are sad. They match the hour." She set the spoon down and folded her arms, hugging herself. I waited. She had the same tell she'd had since she was 7, when something big was coming. She rubbed the inside of her left wrist with her thumb, slow circles, like she was trying to erase something written there in invisible ink. Finally, "Can I ask you something I've never asked you out loud?" I turned the burner off. Whatever this was, it didn't need an audience of cold lentils. Always. She took the kind of breath that starts at the soles of your feet. "How did you really know that you were in love with Daniel? Not just liking him. Not just the neurorelationship chemicals. Like bone deep, life rearranging no?" The question hit me behind the knees. I had to steady myself against the counter. Daniel and I had been married 6 years, together 9. People assumed the story was finished, sealed, framed on the mantle. They didn't know I still woke up some nights terrified I'd dreamed the whole thing. I looked at Horelli. Looked. The way her shoulders curved inward, the faint shine of panic in her eyes. This wasn't theoretical. This was confession dressed up as curiosity. "Come here," I said, soft. We left the kitchen and its ghosts. Walked through the dark apartment to the living room where the big window overlooked the water. I dropped onto the couch. Noah curled into the corner opposite me, knees to chest, the way she used to when Mom made her eat peas. Some habits outlive childhood. I pulled the throw blanket over both of us because the pre-dawn was cold and because it gave us something to share. It wasn't one moment. I started. That's the lie movies sell. It was 1,000 small ones that added up until I couldn't subtract them anymore. She waited, thumb still circling her wrist. "There was this night," I said. Early. Maybe 4 months in. We'd had a stupid fight, something about whose turn it was to call the plumber. I don't even remember. I stormed out, walked about 20 blocks in the rain because I was 34 and apparently still capable of dramatics. I ended up at that 24-hour diner on 14th, the one with the broken neon pig. Sat there dripping on the counter, eating burnt pie, feeling like an idiot. Noah's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Daniel showed up 40 minutes later. Not because I texted him my phone was dead. He just walked in soaking wet, hair plastered to his forehead, carrying the ugliest umbrella I'd ever seen. Some floral thing he must have stolen from the lobby of his building. Didn't say a word about the fight. Just slid into the booth across from me, stole half my pie, and said, "We're going to get pneumonia, and then who's going to reach the good mugs on the top shelf?" I laughed under my breath, remembering that wasn't the moment I told her. The moment was on the walk home. We were sharing that ridiculous umbrella, shoulders bumping, and he started humming. Some old jazz thing our dad used to play in the car on road trips. And I realized I wasn't walking next to a guy I was dating. I was walking next to the person who already knew which songs lived in my bones. And instead of being terrified, I felt found. Noah's eyes were glassy. "I tried to talk myself out of it for months," I went on. Told myself it was too soon, that I was romanticizing, that I'd been alone too long and was latching on. This is embarrassing, I even made a pros and cons list. She barked a small laugh. You absolute nerd. 11 pages, front and back. I still have it somewhere. The con list had things like he squeezes toothpaste from the middle, and he talks to houseplants like they answer back. The pro list just said, over and over, in increasingly desperate handwriting, he feels like home. He feels like home. He feels like home. Tugged her wrist gently until she stopped rubbing it raw. Listen to me. Noe Luvat, its ugliest and besties recognition. Not the lightning bolt. The quiet, relentless yes that keeps showing up even when you're furious or frightened or trying to be sensible. It's the person who knows you're allergic to kiwi but still buys the fruit salad because they'll eat all the kiwi parts for you. It's the person who sees the version of you that existed before the world taught you which parts to hide and loves that kid just as hard as the adult. Oh, she was crying now, not dramatically. Just a steady leak she didn't bother wiping away. There's someone, she whispered. At the firm, Julian, the new associate in litigation, he remembers how I take my coffee on days when I've forgotten my own name. He leaves sticky notes on my monitor when I'm in depositions that just say breathe in his ridiculous architect handwriting. And last week, when the partners shredded my memo in front of the entire team, he waited until everyone left, and then he redlined the whole thing again, by hand, at 2 a.m, and slid it under my office door with a bag of those cinnamon candies I like. Didn't say a word about it the next day. Just looked at me across the conference table like he was proud I was still standing. She swallowed hard. I'm terrified, Eli. Because what if I let myself feel this, and it ruins everything? What if I'm wrong? What if he doesn't? What if I'm too much, or not enough? Or I moved across the couch, pulled her into my lap the way I did when she was 9, and convinced monsters lived under her bed. She let me. She was shaking. You are the most enough person I know, I told her, fierce. And anyone who gets to love you should thank the universe every single day for the privilege. Julian already seems halfway there. The rest is just courage. She pressed her face into my shoulder, the same way she had the night we found out Dad's cancer had spread. The night Mom called to say she wasn't coming home for Christmas. The night she got her first period in 8th grade and cried, because she thought it meant she was dying. I don't know how to do this part, she mumbled into my shirt. You don't have to know yet. You just have to not lie to yourself at 4 a.m. That's step 1. The rest we figure out as it comes. We stayed like that until the sky outside turned the color of weak tea. Somewhere below, the first delivery trucks started their engines. Noah's breathing evened out. She was almost asleep against my chest. Hey, I whispered into her hair. For what it's worth, I like him already. Anyone who brings you cinnamon candies and silent solidarity is good people. She made a small sound, half laugh, half sob. Also, I added, if he hurts you, I still know where to hide a body. Lawyer skills. That earned me the ghost of a real smile. The city woke up around us, indifferent and loud. Inside our little pocket of dawn, 2 siblings held on to the only certainty we'd ever been given. Whatever came next, we would not let each other drown. And somewhere across town, I hoped Julian was awake too, staring at his ceiling, feeling the same terrifying, wondrous pull toward the quiet, relentless yes. The radiator in our Lisbon apartment clanked like it was trying to speak. Portuguese at 3 a.m. when Sophia shook me awake. The room smelled of salt air from the open window, and the last stubborn cigarette she'd sworn was her final one. She was sitting on the edge of my bed, knees drawn up, wearing the oversized cardigan she'd stolen from her older brother years ago. I think I'm in love with Leonor, she whispered, as if saying it any louder might make it real enough to ruin everything. I blinked the sleep from my eyes. The marine biologist? The one who talks to octopuses like they're gossiping old ladies? Sophia laughed once, a cracked sound. Exactly that one. She told me how it started. Leonor coming into the aquarium where Sophia worked as an educator, dripping wet from a dive, hair twisted up with a pencil, asking if the gift shop sold anything stronger than postcards. Sophia had handed her a tiny plastic octopus keychain instead and said, "This one's named Antonio. He judges people." Leonore had laughed so hard she'd snorted, and Sophia had felt her stomach drop straight through the floor and into the shark tank. For months, Sophia convinced herself it was just admiration. Leonore was brilliant, fearless, published at 29, invited to conferences in places Sophia couldn't pronounce. Of course she was obsessed. That was normal. Healthy, even. Hero worship. Nothing queer about it, except she'd started timing her lunch breaks so she could watch. Leonore sketched tide pool diagrams on napkins. She knew exactly how Leonore held her coffee to hands like it might escape. How she pushed her glasses up with the back of her wrist when her fingers were covered in ink. She had memorized the small scar on Leonore's left eyebrow from a run-in with a moray eel. She knew all of this, and still told herself it was nothing. I listened to her unravel in the dark. The way people only do when the rest of the world is asleep and there's no audience left to perform for. When she finished, she looked at me with wet, terrified eyes. "Is this what it's supposed to feel like?" she asked. "Like you're about to throw up, but also, you've never been happier to be alive." I smiled, even though it hurt. "Yeah," I said. "That's the beginning of knowing yourself through wanting someone else." We stayed up until the sky over the Tijo turned the color of peach flesh. Sophia called in sick. I did the same. We made torradas with too much butter and drank coffee strong enough to wake the dead. We watched old Pedro Almodovar films with the volume low and talked over them. About every time we'd forced ourselves to date boys because it was easier. About how desire can feel like treason. When you've spent your whole life being told who you're allowed to want, at some point, Sophia fell asleep curled against me on the couch. Her head heavy on my thigh, breathing slow, and even for the first time in weeks, I sat there stroking her hair and thought, this is what she needed. Not advice. Just someone to say, I've stood exactly where you're standing, barefoot on the hot sand, afraid the tide will drag me under, and I survived it. You will too. 2 weeks later, I came home from the language school where I taught English to find Sophia in the kitchen again. This time it was evening, the windows open to the sound of trams groaning uphill, and she was crying so hard she could barely stand. Leonore asked her out. Leonore, who apparently had also been timing coffee breaks and memorizing. Small, meaningless details the way Sophia pronounced polvo with a tiny smile. The constellation of freckles across her nose that only showed up in summer. Had finally worked up the courage after closing shift. They'd been alone in the touch pool room, the moon jellies pulsing soft violet around them like living lanterns. She said she didn't want to make things weird at work. Sophia sobbed into my shoulder the second I reached her, but she'd really like to have dinner with me. Just us, like a date. And I said yes, and then my brain screamed that I'm not ready. And I've never actually kissed a woman, and what if I'm bad at it and everyone finds out I'm a fraud? And I panicked. And told her I couldn't because I have plans with my cousin from Porto who doesn't exist. She was shaking so hard, the glasses in the cabinet rattled in sympathy. I guided her to the table, poured her a glass of water she didn't drink, and made her tell me everything twice. When she finished, she dropped her head into her hands. I'm going to have to quit, she said, muffled. I'll move to the Azores. I'll become a goat farmer. No one falls in love with goat farmers. I pulled her hands away from her face. Sophia breathed. Leonore is probably on the night. Bus home right now, convinced she just sexually harassed a coworker and trying to figure out how to emigrate to Iceland. She stared at me. Mascara streaked down to her chin. You don't know that? I do, I said. I know because I have been the person who finally asked, and I have been the person who panicked and lied about a fake cousin. Most of us have. The ones who sail through it without terror are either liars or have never actually been in love. She laughed, a wet hiccuping sound. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. No one taught me. There were no movies where the girl from Almada gets the girl who talks to squid. I don't have a script. I took both her hands. You don't need a script. You just need to stop running long enough to let yourself be wanted back. That's all. She cried again then, quieter this time, the kind of crying that comes after the storm when everything is washed clean. I held her until the streetlights came on in the city. It sounded like it was exhaling. The next morning, she texted Leonore before I was even out of bed. Hey, my cousin's flight got canceled. I'm free for dinner if you still want. I'm terrified, by the way. Just so you know, Leonore's reply came in under 30 seconds. Thank God I've been drafting resignation letters all night. Friday. I know a place that does cataplana and doesn't judge nervous wrecks. Sophia showed me the screen with trembling fingers. Then she looked up at me, eyes wide and shining, and for the first time in her life she didn't look like someone trying to fold herself, small enough to disappear. She looked like someone stepping into the light. My little sister's name is Lila. She's 24, slight as a bird. With a mop of dark curls she's never learned to tame in a laugh. Now that still sounds like the 8-year-old who used to hide under the kitchen table when she was scared of thunderstorms. For years she lived in the apartment with me in Portland. It's the one with the creaky radiators and the window that sticks in the rain. I'm Elias, 31, pediatric nurse, serial overworker, the one who raised her after our parents decided the world was easier to face from separate coasts. Lila had always dated boys, the way people collect souvenirs, politely, briefly, and with no intention of keeping them. Then came Rowan. Rowan worked with her at the independent bookstore on Hawthorne, the one with the cat who thinks he owns the poetry section. He was tall, and the way ladders are tall, all elbows and quiet smiles, with round glasses that slid down his nose when he read aloud to the kids on Saturday mornings. I'd met him a few times when I picked Lila up after closing. He always said hello like he meant it, asked about my shift, remembered that I drink oat milk lattes. Harmless, sweet, UNTHREATNING. Then one Thursday in February, Lila came home at 2 a.m., sat on the couch, still in her coat, and stared at the wall like it had personally betrayed her. I think I just turned Rowan down for a date, she said, voice small, like aggressively, like I might have invented new ways to say no. I muted the basketball game. Start from the beginning.
Yes.
She told me he'd asked her after closing, casual as anything, coffee, maybe dinner, no pressure. And she had panicked so hard she'd laughed in his face. I'd told him she was flattered, but not like that, then practically sprinted to the bus stop. She looked like she was going to be sick. Lila, I said carefully, why did you do that? She pressed her palms to her eyes. Because I wanted to say yes so badly, it felt like dying. The room went quiet except for the radiator clanking like it was trying to fill the silence. I'm gay, Elias, she whispered. Or bi, or something. I don't know the word yet. I just know I've been pretending for years because it was easier, and Rowan is. He's kind and he's funny and he smells like books and cedar, and I want to kiss him so much it's stupid, and I ruined it because I'm a coward. I moved over and sat next to her. She curled into me the way she did when we were kids and the power went out. You're not a coward, I said. You're 24 and figuring it out in real time. That's not cowardice. That's just being human. She cried into my shoulder until my shirt was soaked. Then she looked up, mascara everywhere, and asked, what do I do now? You tell him the truth? That I'm a walking disaster who rejected him because I'm terrified of how much I like him? Pretty much, yeah. She laughed once, wet and broken. He's never going to speak to me again, or I said, he'll understand. People who read poetry to children for free usually have some capacity for grace. She texted him the next morning. I proofread it 7 times. It was short, mortifyingly honest. I lied yesterday. I panicked. I'm figuring some big things out, and I got scared. If the offer still stands, I'd really like to have dinner with you. No pressure if you'd rather not, he replied within 2 minutes. I'd like that very much. Friday. She came into my room that night holding her phone like it might explode. He said yes. Elias? He said yes. Friday, I helped her pick an outfit: black jeans. The green sweater that makes her eyes look like tide pools. Minimal eyeliner, because she cries when she's nervous, and we both knew she would. I drove her to the little ramen place on Belmont, parked half a block away, and waited like I used to wait outside the principal's office in middle school. She texted me every 10 minutes at first. He's wearing the blue shirt. He smiled when he saw me. He said he was nervous too. Then an hour went by. Then two. My phone buzzed. He held my hand across the table. I didn't pull away. I think I'm floating. When I picked her up, she was glowing in the streetlight. Cheeks flushed, hair frizzing from the drizzle. She got in the car and just looked at me for a long second. He kissed me, she said. Outside the restaurant, it was gentle. Like he was asking permission with his whole body. I reached over and squeezed her knee. Good, I said. My voice cracked on the word. 3 months later, she was barely sleeping at our apartment anymore. Her toothbrush lived at Rowan's place above the record store. Her favorite cardigan never made it back from his couch. She still came home sometimes to do laundry and eat my cooking, but it wasn't the same. The apartment felt too big, the radiators too loud. I started picking up extra shifts at the hospital. Nights, doubles, holidays. Anything to come home exhausted enough to fall straight into bed. Lila noticed, of course. She always did. She cornered me one Sunday morning while I was attempting pancakes and failing. "You're avoiding me," she said, stealing a blueberry. "Don't lie. You flinch every time I say I'm going to Rowan's. You haven't had anyone over since." March. You said lol when I told you we adopted a cat together? A cat, Elias. You love cats. I'm happy for you, I said, flipping a pancake too hard. It folded in half like a sad taco. You keep saying that like it's a shield. She turned the burner off and made me look at her. Talk to me. Set the spatula down. The words stuck in my throat. I'm proud of you, I said finally. I am. You were so brave. You walked straight into the hardest thing, and you didn't flinch. And now you have this person who sees you, all of you, and loves you anyway. That's everything I ever wanted for you, but the apartment's quiet. And I come home and your shoes aren't by the door and your weird herbal tea isn't clogging the sink. And I realize I spent 10 years being the most important person in your life, and now I'm not. And that's right, that's how it's supposed to work. But it hurts anyway. And I don't know how to say that without sounding selfish. She was quiet for a long time. Then she walked around the counter and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind, pressing her face between my shoulder blades the way she did when she was little. You're still my favorite person, she said, voice muffled against my shirt. That doesn't go away just because I'm in love with someone else. There's room for both. There's always room for you. I turned around and hugged her properly. She smelled like Rowan's cedar and bookstore scent now. It's mixed with her own coconut shampoo, and it broke something open in my chest. I just miss you, admitted. I miss you too, she said. Come over tonight. Rowan's making lasagna. He wants to show you the cat. Her name is Pancake, because apparently I make terrible pancakes, and he thinks that's hilarious. I laughed, wet and surprised. Okay, I said. I'll come. That night, I sat on their lumpy couch with a gray tabby on my lap and watched my little sister lean into Rowan's side while he cut ridiculously uneven pieces of lasagna. He kept touching her hair like he couldn't quite believe she was real. She kept looking at me like she was making sure I was still there. I was. I always would be. Love doesn't replace love. It just makes the circle bigger. I was learning that the hard way, one quiet apartment night at a time. The voice on the phone was careful, measured, the way people speak when they're trying not to set off a bomb. You're dating women now. I let the silence do the work for a second. I date whoever I'm interested in, I said. It was technically true and completely irrelevant, but you've never been interested in women. Not once, not ever. That's not fair, I answered too quickly. Then, sharper than I meant. My sexuality isn't your business. The second the words left my mouth, I saw them land. Leo flinched like I'd slapped him, but he didn't look away. You're right, he said, voice low. It's not my business. But we are. You and me, this friendship, that's my business. And something's wrong, and you're locking me out, and I'm tired of pretending I don't notice. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet was worse. I turned my chair to the window. Outside, Brooklyn was slipping into evening, headlights smearing gold across wet pavement. People spilling out of the subway, hurrying toward apartments, toward lovers, toward lives that still had room for them. Do you remember? I said to the glass, what you asked me that night. 3 a.m, both of us half drunk on the fire escape, and you wanted to know how I knew. How I really knew. I remember, Leo said behind me. I gave you a neat little answer, didn't I? Like it was simple. Like one day the universe just handed me a memo that said, congratulations, you're gay, here's your starter kit. Leo laughed once, soft. You made it sound heroic. It was just true. I knew. And then I came out, and I dated. I did everything the story says you're supposed to do once the truth is out of your mouth. Apps, bars, introductions, the whole exhausting circus. And somewhere in the middle of it, I just ran out. I heard the couch creak as Leo shifted. He didn't fill the silence. He waited. I got tired, I said. Tired of the audition process. Tired of being charming enough to get a second date and not quite enough for someone to stay. Tired of watching guys fall in love with the idea of me and then realize the reality required too much work. So I stopped. I told myself I was choosing peace. Curated solitude. Plants and podcasts and a mattress I didn't have to share. I had you. I had my job. I had routines. I told everyone I was fine. Were you? Leo asked. No. The word came out raw. I was lonely in this very specific way. Like I'd built a beautiful house and then bricked up all the doors from the inside. The room stayed quiet long enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum. So why tell me now? Leo said finally. I turned around. He was watching me with that steady patience that had survived every version of us since we were 19, because watching you be brave made me ashamed of how long I've been a coward, I said. You're out there falling in love again after Daniel tore your heart out through your ribcage, and I realized I stopped risking anything years ago. Hiding isn't safety. It's slow death with better lighting. Leo's eyes softened. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said. But I'm done pretending the story's over. Took 17 more days, 17 days of waking up at 4 a.m. with my pulse racing like I'd already been rejected by someone who hadn't even met me yet. 17 days of opening apps and closing them again. Thumb hovering like a gun, I couldn't decide whether to aim at my own foot. Then Sarah, my oldest friend, the one who still calls me baby gay when she's drunk, had a dinner party. Nothing fancy. Lasagna, too much wine, her cramped living room full of mismatched chairs. I almost canceled. I was halfway through typing the excuse when I thought, this is how it keeps winning, the fear. You let it choose for you, so I went. And there was Mateo. He was leaning against Sarah's bookshelf when I walked in, holding a glass of red like it had personally offended him. Dark hair falling over his forehead, sleeves pushed up, one eyebrow permanently arched like he'd already heard every story you were about to tell, and was deciding whether it was worth his time. Sarah introduced us with a gleam in her eye. I chose to ignore. Mateo teaches 9th grade English, she said. He's the one who convinces 14-year-olds that poetry won't kill them, yet Mateo added, and shook my hand. His grip was warm, steady, unhurried. We talked about books first safe, then about students, about Brooklyn rents, about the way autumn smells different above 96th Street. He listened, like listening was a form of touch. When I told him I designed album covers for bands no one had heard of yet, he didn't do that thing people do where they nod too hard and say that's so cool without meaning it. He asked what music I was listening to while I worked. And when I admitted it was mostly sad gay singers, he laughed quietly and said, same. But I hide it better in front of the children. At some point the lasagna was gone, and people were arguing about reality TV, and I realized I hadn't checked my phone once. I realized I was standing closer to him than strictly necessary. I realized his hand had brushed mine, reaching for the same bottle, and neither of us had moved away. Sarah caught my eye across the room and smirked, like she'd orchestrated the entire evening. Maybe she had. He asked for my number before he left. Not in that casual throwaway way people do when they have no intention of using it. He typed my name into his phone slowly, like he was making sure he spelled it right. I waited for days to text. 4 days of walking around feeling like I'd swallowed a swarm of bees. 4 days of drafting and deleting, of standing in the shower with my forehead against the tile trying to breathe through the certainty that he'd forgotten me entirely. Then I sent, "Hey, it's Eli from Saris. If you're free this week, I know a place with excellent espresso and tolerable humans." He answered 43 minutes later, "Tolerable humans is a high bar. I'm impressed." Thursday. Something in my chest unknotted so fast it hurt. We met at a tiny cafe in Bushwick with mismatched chairs and a barista who called everyone my love. He wore a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look almost green. I wore the blue shirt I'd changed into and out of 6 times. We talked for 3 hours. About his students writing poems about heartbreak they were too young to have earned yet. About the way I sometimes design covers for albums I don't even like because rent is a tyrant. About the years we each spent convinced we were too broken to be loved out loud when we left. The air had turned sharp enough to bite. He zipped his jacket and looked at me sideways. "This was good," he said. "I mean really good," I managed. My heart was trying to climb out of my throat. He stepped closer. "I have a strict policy against kissing on first dates." "Oh," I said, and hated how small it sounded. But he continued, voice softer. "I make exceptions for second dates that start right now." So we stood under the awning while the city moved around us, and he kissed me like he'd been waiting years to do it. Slow, certain, no audience, no performance. Just 2 people who had both spent too long alone deciding the risk might finally be worth it. Later, back at my apartment, his coat still on the chair, his shoes by the door. He traced the scar on my shoulder from a surgery I'd had at 23 and asked whose name I'd been saying in my sleep the first time. I ever let someone stay the whole night and leave in the morning? I told him the truth. No one's. I'd never let anyone stay, long enough to find out. He looked at me for a long time. "I'm not asking you to be fearless," he said. "Just don't disappear on me before we figure out what this is." I nodded against his chest. Breathing him in coffee and cedar and something warm I didn't have a name for yet. "I'm done disappearing," I said. "I'm terrified, but I'm done." Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent and alive. Inside, for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to choose me. I was choosing. The night Sophia asked me was ordinary in every way, except that it was late October. It was late October, the radiator clanking like it always did, the kitchen lit only by the weak bulb over the stove. I was 29, half asleep over a mug of chamomile that had gone cold, wearing the same faded Columbia law hoodie I'd had since undergrad. My little sister stood in the doorway in her high school soccer sweatpants, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though the apartment was too warm. "Ale," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "How did you know you were gay?" I remember the question landing like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples everywhere. I had come out to our parents at 22, survived the screaming, the silence, the slow thaw. I had dated women who never quite fit, then men who did. Then one man who shattered me so completely, I thought the pieces would never reassemble. For 4 years, I had lived alone in this railroad flat in Washington Heights, convincing myself that solitude was noble, that I was fine. I was a public defender by day, a ghost by night. I looked at my sister 16, all sharp elbows and sharper intuition, and I told her the truth. I knew, I said. Because when I let myself imagine a future, the person beside me was always a man. And when I tried to imagine a woman there instead, it felt like lying. She nodded once, like she'd been holding her breath for years, and finally let it go. That was the beginning. 3 years later, I was helping her move into an apartment in Bushwick with her girlfriend. Sophia's room in our childhood house in Jersey had been emptied box by box. Posters of Megan Rapinoe and Haley Kiyoko rolled carefully into tubes. Mom cried when we carried out the last one. Dad pretended he had something in his eye. I stood in Sophia's old bedroom walls, freshly painted the beige of neutrality, and felt the strange ache of space being made. My own apartment would stay mine, but it no longer felt like a bunker. Because most nights it wasn't empty anymore. Most nights it contained Luca, his sheet music scattered on the coffee table, his half-finished mugs of espresso, the low hum of his cello from the living room while I graded depositions at the kitchen table. Luca, who taught music theory at Juilliard and looked at me like I was the melody he'd been trying to write for years. Sophia hugged me hard in that stripped-bare room. "Thank you," she said into my shoulder. "For what?" "For answering me that night. For not pretending. For proving we don't have to be miserable." I laughed, but it came out wet. "I was barely holding it together back then. Still showed up," she said. "That's the part that mattered." She pulled back and grinned, the same crooked grin she'd had since she was 6. "You're going to marry him, you know?" "Luca?" "No, the UPS guy." "Yes, Luca. He's already asked Marisol where to get vintage rings sized. He's hopeless at secrets." I stared at her. My heart did something complicated. It's only been 18 months. 18 months of him looking at you like you hung the moon ale. Say yes when he asks. "Trust me," he asked 6 months later on the high bridge at sunset, the Hudson glittering below us like it was in on the conspiracy. The ring was white gold, simple, worn soft at the edges, bought from an estate sale in the Hudson Valley. He got down on one knee even though his jeans were already filthy from the hike up. And before he finished the sentence, I was saying yes. Yes, yes. Like a man who'd been drowning and finally remembered how lungs worked, we sat on the cold stone walkway afterward and cried into each other's necks while joggers politely stepped around. The engagement party was at Sophia and Marisol's new place, a railroad loft with too many plants and a kitchen island that became a bar. Our parents came up from Jersey. My co-workers from legal aid, Luca's students who kept calling me Professor's fiancé with gleeful reverence. Sophia made empanadas that were better than Mom's. We would never admit that out loud. At one point, she dragged me out onto the fire escape where the city hummed below us like it was proud. "I'm proud of you," she said, bumping my shoulder. "You could have stayed locked up in that apartment forever. You didn't." I looked at her, this kid who used to steal my CDs and now stood here radiant, out and unafraid, and felt something inside me click into permanent place. "I'm proud of you too," I told her, "for trusting me with the hardest question you'd ever asked. You were braver at 16 than I was at 29. Laughed. "We just took turns, I guess." 2 summers later, I married Luca on a rooftop in Red Hook, with the Statue of Liberty winking in the distance. Sophia stood up as my best woman and gave a speech that roasted me gently and then gutted everyone with sincerity. When she got to the part about the night in the kitchen, half the guests were crying into their champagne. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand so hard I still have the faint mark, when Luca and I kissed husbands. Finally, Sophia caught my eye across the crowd and lifted her glass. I knew exactly what she was remembering: the radiator clanking, the cold tea, the question that changed both our lives. We never did pin down why she asked me that particular night. She insists the universe just nudged her. I think some moments are miracles too small to explain and too large to ignore. 5 years after the wedding, Luca and I bought a brownstone in Bed-Stuy. I fought for the kitchen with the huge eastern window because I wanted morning light spilling over the table the way it had that night gold. Honest, a little unforgiving. Sophia and Marisol got married the following spring in a wildflower field upstate, and Luca and I helped plan every detail down to the late-night Arepas truck, sometimes very early, before the city wakes up. I sit at that kitchen table with coffee going cold and watch the light move across the floorboards. Luca pads in, hair sticking up, wraps his arms around me from behind, and rests his chin on my shoulder. We don't speak. We don't need to. I think about how one question asked in the dark by a scared teenager became the first domino. How her courage taught me that staying open is harder and infinitely better than staying safe. How love is less a lightning strike than a series of small, repeated yeses. Yes to coffee. Yes to a second date. Yes to letting someone see the ugly parts. Yes to moving in. Yes to forever on a bridge at sunset. The answer I gave Sophia all those years ago turned out to be incomplete. How did I know? I knew because someone loved me enough to wait while I remembered I was lovable. I knew because my little sister trusted me with her terror and I refused to hand her shame. I knew because courage is contagious. And love is the decision renewed every morning in the eastern light to keep catching it from each other. And was it worth it? Every cracked open moment, every 3 a.m. panic, every time I thought I'd never be whole again. God, yes. 1,000 times yes.